If you see a cuneiform tablet for the first time, you're not likely to identify it as writing.
Look up tonight. Count the lights in the sky that are not stars. Go ahead. Count them. You get one. One moon. One object close enough to matter. One gravitational presence pulling at the oceans, controlling the tides, keeping this planet in a rhythm that has never once changed in your lifetime or your parents' lifetime or any lifetime anyone you have ever known has lived through. One moon. That number feels like physics, like a law of nature so fundamental that questioning it feels almost absurd. But there is a clay tablet, sitting in a museum, cataloged, available to scholars since the 1850s. And what it records, not in poetry, not in prayer, not in mythology, but in the precise observational language of professional astronomers, is a sky where that number was not one. It was two. And it describes, with clinical precision, the night the second one broke apart. What came after that night was not recorded as a story. It was recorded as a warning. Fire, flood, darkness, a collapse so total that the civilization on the other side of it had to rebuild everything from scratch. Stay with me, because this is not a theory. Everything I am about to show you is documented. Named researchers, published studies, physical evidence in the geological record, and a sequence of events that, when you line them up together, points in one direction so clearly that the only mystery left is why we are not talking about it. Picture the top of a ziggurat somewhere in ancient Mesopotamia. Before dawn, still dark, a man climbs the stone steps the way he has climbed them every morning for 20 years. He is not a priest. He is not a prophet. He is an astronomer, a professional, government employed. His job is to watch the sky and write down exactly what he sees. He knows the sky completely. Every planet, every pattern, every cycle. He could draw the position of every visible object from memory. He reaches the top. He looks up, and he stops. There is something there that was not there last month. He does not run. He does not interpret. He does not reach for the religious vocabulary. He reaches for a clay tablet and a reed stylus. And he starts writing. What he writes over the following months becomes the document that has been sitting in a museum for over a century. Read, partially translated, and then, quietly, carefully, consistently, set aside. Because what it describes does not fit anywhere in the established model of what the ancient sky looked like. Here is what it says, not the mythology version, the literal translation. An object with its own light, not reflected light like the moon reflects sunlight. Its own source, moving in a trajectory that no known planet follows. Large enough that the tidal behavior of the oceans changed during its presence. Large enough that other texts written during the same period describe the sea doing things that the sea does not normally do. And it stayed. Not for a night, not for a week, not for a season, for approximately 340 days. Then it broke apart. 340 days. Hold that number for a second, because it is not a round number. It is not a symbolic number. It is not the kind of number that appears in mythology when someone is trying to make a point about divine proportion or cosmic perfection. It is a duration record, a measurement, the kind of specific, awkward, unpoetic number that professional astronomers write down because their entire system of prediction depends on precision. And here is the thing about Babylonian astronomers that the academic literature accepts completely and then somehow fails to apply to this specific document. They were accurate. We have centuries of their astronomical records. We can check them against modern calculations retroactively. And they are right. Their eclipse predictions are correct. Their planetary position records are precise enough that modern scholars use them to reconstruct ancient chronology. Their observations of Venus, tracked across multiple full cycles, match modern calculations within a margin of error that would be acceptable in a modern observatory. These were not ancient people inventing numbers to make stories sound impressive. These were trained observers making precise records of what they saw. When they recorded 340 days, they meant 340 days. So when those same observers, using the same precision, the same vocabulary, the same professional standards, recorded an object that did not match any known celestial body, the question is not whether they were confused. The question is what they were looking at. Now here is where it stops being ancient history. An asteroid of sufficient size, entering Earth's orbital neighborhood at the right angle and the right speed, can be captured by Earth's gravity. Temporarily, it enters a chaotic orbit influenced simultaneously by Earth's gravity, the moon's gravity, and the sun's gravitational pull. The object loops. It stays. And then eventually the orbital mechanics work out, and it either escapes or it does not. This is not theoretical. This is documented solar system behavior. In 2006, an object designated 2006 RH120 was captured by Earth's gravity and orbited for approximately 11 months before escaping. In 2020, an object designated 2020 CD3 did the same thing. Smaller objects, brief captures, but the mechanism is confirmed. The physics is real. The University of Colorado published a study in 2022 specifically modeling the conditions under which a larger object could be captured for longer periods. The paper did not address the historical record. It was not within the scope of the study, but the physics it described maps directly onto what the Babylonian tablet records. An object, captured, visible for approximately a year. Now consider what happens when that object is not small, when it is large enough to have its own measurable gravitational effect. Large enough to alter tidal behavior, large enough to be visible in daylight. Everything changes. Tides increase dramatically. The length of the day shifts slightly as Earth's rotational dynamics respond to the new mass. Seismic activity increases as the crust responds to the additional tidal stress. Atmospheric pressure gradients change. Weather patterns destabilize. Precipitation increases. Coastal flooding events become more frequent and more severe. None of this is subtle at that scale. An ancient agricultural civilization living along river systems and coastlines would feel every single one of these effects immediately, and they would record them as catastrophe, as divine punishment, as the natural order of the world coming undone, which is exactly what the associated texts describe. The Sumerian flood narratives are older than the biblical flood account. The biblical account is derived from them. Scholars know this. The clay tablet versions predate Genesis by at least 1,000 years. And the original Sumerian texts do not describe 40 days of rain. Read them carefully, not the translated summaries. The actual texts. They describe prolonged atmospheric disruption across multiple seasons. They describe multiple distinct flood events, not a single rainfall. They describe seismic activity, darkness, a period in which the normal behavior of the sky was so completely disrupted that the scribes describe it as the order of heaven being undone. They describe the ocean rising in ways that ocean water does not rise from rainfall. Scholars have explained this for decades as regional flooding in the Mesopotamian floodplain. And regional flooding in Mesopotamia is real. It has happened multiple times. The archaeological record documents flood layers at multiple sites. But there is a problem with that explanation when you read the text precisely. The geographic scope of the disruption described is not regional. It is not even continental. Multiple civilizations across multiple continents preserve records of the same disruption in the same time window. The texts are not describing one river overflowing its banks. They are describing a world coming apart. That is not what a regional flood looks like. That is what a fragmented captured object looks like. 12,900 years ago, based on multiple independent dating methods, something happened to this planet. Scientists call it the Younger Dryas boundary event. And it is one of the most fiercely debated questions in contemporary geology, not because the evidence is unclear, because the evidence is extremely clear and the explanation required to account for it is one that the established model of Earth history has resisted for 30 years. Here is what the geological record shows at that exact moment in time. Temperatures dropped sharply, then reversed and rose catastrophically fast. Ice sheets that had been stable for millennia collapsed within what appears to be a human lifetime. Sea levels rose dramatically and rapidly. Multiple large mammal species went extinct simultaneously across 3 continents. Dozens of human settlements across North America, Europe, and the Middle East were abandoned at the same date. Not at approximately the same date. At the same stratigraphic layer. The same geological moment. And in that sediment layer, and only in that layer, researchers have found nanodiamonds. Tiny crystals that form under one set of conditions, and one set of conditions only. Extreme pressure. The kind of pressure produced by a large object impacting the Earth at high velocity. They also found shock quartz, iridium anomalies, melted glass spherules, magnetic microspherules, the complete chemical fingerprint of an impact event. Across North America, across Europe, across the Middle East. Not concentrated at one point. Distributed, widespread, as if multiple objects came in from multiple directions over an extended period. That is the impact hypothesis. And the reason it has been debated for 30 years without resolution is not that the evidence is weak. The evidence is substantial. The reason it has been debated is that it requires a crater. A single, definitive, large impact crater. And that crater has not been conclusively identified. But here is what the Babylonian tablet changes about that requirement. If the object that caused the Younger Dryas event was not a single asteroid that arrived cleanly and impacted at one point, if it was a captured object that fragmented in Earth's orbital neighborhood and rained down in pieces across an extended period, then there is no single large crater. There are multiple smaller impact sites distributed across a wide area. some impacting ice sheets that subsequently melted, some impacting ocean, some impacting land. The evidence we have matches that scenario exactly. The evidence we have has never satisfactorily matched the single impact scenario. The tablet describes the fragmentation. The geology documents the result. The two pieces of evidence are describing the same event from two different directions. Now let me tell you about the animals, because this is the part that is hardest to explain away. At the Younger Dryas boundary, at that same precise geological moment, approximately 35 genera of large mammals went extinct in North America alone. Mastodons, mammoths, giant ground sloths, native horses, native camels, short-faced bears, American lions, multiple species that had survived every previous climate shift, every ice advance, every glacial period for hundreds of thousands of years. All gone, simultaneously. Not in the gradual pattern that climate-driven extinction produces, where different species fail at different times in different regions as their specific habitat conditions slowly deteriorate. Not spread out over thousands of years as different animals lose their ecological footing one by one. All of them, at once, in a geological instant. The same moment the nanodiamonds appear in the sediment. The same moment the ice sheets collapse. The same moment dozens of human settlements are abandoned across 3 continents. Climate change does not do that. Gradual warming does not erase 35 genera in one geological moment across an entire continent. The pattern of what we find in the fossil record at that boundary is not the pattern of slow environmental pressure. It is the pattern of sudden catastrophic environmental collapse. The kind of collapse that happens when the sky catches fire, when fragments of a disintegrating object come through the atmosphere in rapid succession, when the fires start everywhere at once, when the atmospheric particulate from simultaneous impacts blocks enough sunlight to collapse the food chain from the bottom up within months. The mammoths did not fail to adapt to changing temperatures. The mammoths ran out of time. Now I need to tell you about a name. The proselenes. It appears in Greek historical sources referenced by later historians. Not a well-known reference. Not something taught in classical history courses. But it is there. The proselenes were described as a people who existed before the Selene. Before the moon. Not before moonrise tonight. Before this moon. Before the current lunar arrangement. Their name literally means those who came before the moon. The Greeks, who inherited and compiled the mythological traditions of the ancient Mediterranean world, preserved this reference in their histories without knowing what to do with it. It does not fit the Greek cosmological framework. It does not connect to any Greek religious tradition. It sits there in the historical record as a fragment of something older. Something that remembered a time when the sky was different. The Kalevala, the Finnish national epic compiled from oral traditions of unknown but very great age, contains passages describing a second sky object. Not metaphorically, not as a divine symbol, as a physical presence in the sky above the world. Indigenous traditions in South America. Multiple independent traditions with no documented contact with Finnish or Greek sources describe a period before the current moon when a different object occupied a similar position in the sky. When that object was replaced, violently, by what we see now. Mythology is not evidence the way a clay tablet is evidence. I am not asking you to treat it as such. But the pattern of independent convergence across cultures separated by oceans and centuries, all describing the same anomaly in the oldest layers of their oral traditions, is a pattern that has proven meaningful in other contexts. When geologists found the same flood deposits on multiple continents, they concluded that a global flood event had occurred. They did not dismiss the pattern as coincidence. When geneticists found the same population bottleneck across multiple unconnected groups, they concluded that a shared catastrophic event had occurred. The pattern of independent convergence is how evidence works across disciplines. The oral traditions are describing the same anomaly that the Babylonian astronomer recorded with duration data and observational precision. Two independent lines pointing at the same thing. Now here is the question that ties everything together. The question that the mainstream synthesis consistently fails to ask. If a fragmented captured object caused the Younger Dryas catastrophe, the fires, the floods, the temperature collapse, the simultaneous extinction of 35 mammal genera, the abandonment of settlements across 3 continents, then what happened to human knowledge during that period? How did civilization survive? Because it did survive. We know it did because we found what came after it. Sumerian cities, Sumerian writing, Sumerian mathematics sophisticated enough for complex astronomical calculation, Sumerian law, Sumerian large-scale irrigation, all of it appearing in the archaeological record without clear developmental predecessors, without the gradual accumulation of institutional knowledge that a from-scratch development would produce. The knowledge was there. It arrived, essentially complete, in the reconstruction period after the catastrophe. The Sumerian texts answer the question of where it came from directly, the same way they answer every question about the origin of their civilization. Core, the underground domain, the deep place beneath the surface of the earth. The location described in the texts with geographical precision specific enough to lead modern researchers to a single identifiable cave system. The Kanai system in the Fergana Valley, Central Asia. The same cave that a Soviet geological team entered in 1967, found something on the walls 1,500 meters underground, and immediately sealed and classified. The same cave that a 2018 research team confirmed with their own equipment and still cannot excavate because two governments have held their permits in administrative suspension without explanation. The beings credited in the Sumerian texts with preserving the foundational knowledge of civilization through the catastrophe, the me, the laws, the mathematics, the writing, the agricultural systems, lived in core, underground, in a physical location, through a period of surface catastrophe, and when it was over, they brought the knowledge back up. If that sounds like mythology, consider the alternative explanation for why Sumerian civilization appears in the archaeological record without developmental predecessors. Consider the alternative explanation for why the most sophisticated written records of the ancient world consistently and directly credit beings in an underground location for the knowledge that built their civilization. Consider the alternative explanation for why those texts describe that underground location with geographical precision that has now been independently verified. There is no alternative explanation that accounts for all of these things simultaneously. Let me show you the picture that emerges when you put the pieces together. Not one at a time. All of them. Together. A large object, captured into Earth's orbital neighborhood, visible in daylight for approximately 340 days. Recorded by professional astronomers with precision and duration data on a clay tablet that has been sitting in a museum since the 1850s. The object causes tidal disruption, seismic activity, atmospheric destabilization, and prolonged flooding during its period of orbital presence. Ancient agricultural civilizations record this as catastrophic disruption of the natural order. The Sumerian flood narratives describe effects consistent with a large gravitational body in Earth's orbital neighborhood, not effects consistent with regional rainfall. The object fragments. The fragments impact distributed across a wide area. Nanodiamonds, shocked quartz, iridium anomalies, melted glass spherules appear in a single geological horizon across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. 35 genera of large mammals go extinct in North America simultaneously. Dozens of human settlements across 3 continents are abandoned at the same geological moment. The Younger Dryas boundary event, debated for 30 years, matches the orbital fragmentation scenario with precision that the single impact scenario has never achieved. A portion of the surviving population preserves the knowledge base of their civilization underground, in a physical location described in Sumerian texts with geographical precision. Soviet geologists find that location in 1967, discover Sumerian cuneiform inscriptions on the walls 1,500 meters underground, and immediately seal and classify the site. A 2018 research team confirms the inscriptions, detects an unmappable void beyond a deliberate stone blockage, and cannot obtain excavation permits from 2 separate governments. The Sumerian king list marks the fragmentation event as the absolute dividing line of history. Before the flood, after the flood, pre-flood rains are described on a scale inconsistent with normal human lifespans. Post-flood civilization is rebuilt from a knowledge base that arrives essentially complete without clear developmental predecessors. Multiple independent ancient cultures separated by oceans and centuries preserve oral traditions describing a period when the sky contained a second significant object. The Finnish national epic, indigenous South American traditions, Greek historical references to people who existed before the current moon. Every line of evidence points in the same direction. The astronomical record, the geological record, the archaeological record, the genetic record, the oral traditions, the cave system, the classified documents, the suspended permits, all of it pointing at the same event, and at the same question. What was preserved in that cave? What the Soviet geologists found in 1967 that prompted immediate classification rather than academic study? What is behind 6 meters of deliberately placed stone that 2 governments have declined to allow anyone to move? The people who survived that event went underground. They kept the knowledge alive. They came back up. And then they spent generations making absolutely certain that what they had seen and what they had preserved would survive long enough for someone to find it. The tablet is still in the museum. The cave is still sealed. The void is still there behind the blockage. And the second moon, The one that broke apart on a night 12,000 years ago and rained fire across the planet. It is documented. In the sediment. In the fossil record. In the nanodiamonds. In the clay tablets. It was there. And the people who watched it fall made certain we would know it. In the next video, I am taking you inside. Into the Canai Gut Cave system. Into the passages where ancient cuneiform covers the walls 800 meters below the surface. Through the atmospheric hazard zones that the ancient inscriptions warned about 4,000 years ago and that modern sensors confirmed in 2018. And up to the blockage itself, where the radar detected a void so large the signal did not return with a clear boundary. The inscriptions on the walls describe what is beyond it, written by people who had been there, carved into limestone, still legible. I will show you exactly what they say.